The Senior Bowl started on Tuesday, and it's a great chance for the Chargers to look at some of the upcoming prospects for the 2022 NFL Draft. And I think we saw, David, some future Chargers out at Mobile in day one.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is up, man? Welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer. We've been covering the Chargers for over 6 seasons now. We're heading into our 5th season as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you guys for making us your first listen today and the only place you can find daily Chargers video and audio content. We appreciate you guys as always. But today, we didn't really think about it, but the Senior Bowl has started and the practices are going on. And this is such a huge weekend, for scouts, and a huge week to go look at some of the prospects. And I mean, the prospects just keep getting better and better. I mean, Justin Herbert was a Senior Bowl participant as well and showed up there, and the Chargers ended up drafting him. But the Chargers draft a lot of Senior Bowl players. But on today's show, we're going to be looking at some players that stood out on day one and some guys that could make sense for the Chargers. Maybe put those guys on our radar for sure as, prospects we're going to be excited about breaking down even deeper later on. But the Senior Bowl is huge in all NFL circles. So we'll talk about some defensive tackles to start the show, because I think what we learned from Senior Bowl day one is there may be some guys that could drop past the first round if they don't go Jordan Davis or defensive tackle in the first round that you could still be pretty excited about. Then we'll talk about some offensive tackles, including a couple of guys that were even mocked to the Chargers and how they fared going up against some better competition on day one, and then a really, really good edge rusher who's climbing up draft boards. And then at the end, we'll talk about some offensive weapons if the Chargers don't attack those positions early, and a cornerback who came out of nowhere to make some big plays and looked freakishly athletic down in Mobile, Alabama. But David, the Senior Bowl is always fun. I got to go cover it last year. I'm not covering it this year, but what we did see out of day one was a ton of one-on-one situations out floating all around social media, and some guys really, really standing out. And Tom Telesco loves the Senior Bowl. I mean, there was definitely representatives last year when I was down there at the Senior Bowl, and Tom Telesco loves drafting Senior Bowl players. But this is a really big weekend, and I think the Chargers will end up getting some guys that are going to end up playing in this game.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question about it. Like you said, Tom Telesco definitely puts a lot of stock in this game. I mean, one guy that comes to mind from last year's draft is Josh Palmer, a guy who's stood out really, really brightly at the Senior Bowl, beating some really top-level corners, guys that were drafted in the first round, and just cooking those dudes all day long. That, I think, directly resulted in Josh Palmer getting put on the Chargers' radar, and ultimately Tom Telesco selecting him in the 3rd round. But this is a showcase for guys all across the country from some of those small schools that are not going to be able to get the chance to show what they can do. This is their opportunity to go up against the best talent in the United States and really show what they can do and really put that spotlight on their ability to try to improve their draft stock. And there's definitely some guys who did that here in the first practice on Tuesday.
Yeah, and that's just to say, hey, pay attention to what you see coming out of the Senior Bowl, because teams really do value this stuff. There's a ton of scouts down there, and I mean, like I said, Chargers will end up getting somebody from here for sure. But one of the things that stood out, and the really position that dominated the most on day one, was defensive tackle, which is great news for Chargers fans, because with a defensive tackle and the need the Chargers have there, especially being hesitant to take one in round one, you're looking for potential other options, right? One of the guys that everyone was raving about coming out of the first day was Travis Jones, who I've seen floated around Chargers Twitter for sure as a guy that can make sense. And the dude was just straight dominant, David. I mean, we saw him absolutely really manhandling people. I saw the word bully used a lot. And I mean, I think that was the best kind of word for it, because it's the dude from Unconn who was out there just bullying dudes from much bigger schools.
Yeah, and I think the things that you loved, you just look for specific traits out of defensive linemen, and this is my notes here for Travis Jones: powerful, disruptive, relentless, and plays with great leverage. Those are all things that you want out of a defensive lineman, and this guy really showcased that here on day one of the Senior Bowl practices. He really, I think, earned himself some money with this first day of practice.
Yeah, for sure. And I think for the Chargers, what it just shows you is, hey, if you don't get Jordan Davis at 17, maybe in the middle rounds, maybe day 2, day 3, there's other guys you can still get excited about. And I mean, that dude, was just, especially for a run stuffer, because that's the thing is like,
Yeah.
the pass rush was okay. I mean, he definitely can just move people out of the way. I wouldn't say there was a ton of technique there, but at the same time, it's hard to spend a first round pick on a, 2 down lineman like we've talked
Right.
about, right? Are you going to provide pass rush? This dude could come in right away, as a rotating defensive lineman to immediately improve the Chargers' run defense. And that's
And
the
if you
crazy
get
thing.
him later on, you love the value a lot more than having to expend a first round pick on a guy that you're not sold is going to be a complete player worthy of that, round selection. So getting a guy in the later rounds or, middle rounds, wherever he decides to show up. I mean, if this is the guy, that you got to be pretty happy about what he's going to bring to the table immediately.
Yeah, for sure. And this guy, was definitely on some people's radar. But at the same time, there was a lot of guys that were standing out and a lot of really good players. Alabama's Fedarian Mathis is down there. You have Devontae Wyatt, the other really good Georgia defensive lineman, is down there as well. But one of the dudes that seemed to come out of nowhere was LSU's Neil Farrell, who, we talked about, both of these guys were dominant, but Farrell, at least on day one, might have been the most dominant player just on the field. His one-on-ones were disgusting. He in team drills, he was absolutely blowing up plays while he was getting double teamed, showed the anchor that you want in the middle of your front. And just, another guy where it's like, he's just wrecking these dudes. These are players, some of the best players in the country, like probably, out of the top 200, like that list is going to be littered with dudes who are out here. And the guy's manhandling. And that's what you want to see is, or what are you doing against your competition? This guy just going out there and blowing dudes out of the water.
To me, when I was watching Neil Farrell, it's like he was like a bowling ball. He was just like running through people and bouncing. Like they tried to, get guys to chip him. They were getting sick of this guy really quickly.
Yeah.
And he was just running through blockers and he was getting into the backfield consistently. This is another guy who, nobody really knew of. Obviously played from a big school here, but he's really, really making the most of his opportunities. And this is what it's all about here at the Senior Bowl. These guys, really coming in to show what they can do against the best competition. And Neil Farrell really, really showed well. Also, another guy who's going to be able to provide some pass rush and not a guy who's just going to stop the run.
Yeah, he was physically dominant, but he got a couple really quick pressures, a nice swim move, right? Had some quick moves up front. And that's like, yeah, maybe he's not an elite pass rusher, but it's like you like to at least see a dude who has at least some technique there with his hands, is getting people out of the way. And because that's the thing is like when you can just overpower someone,
Yeah.
that's a skill all on its own.
Oh,
But
for sure.
when you also have a changeup that you can throw at people too,
Right.
when they're just bracing themselves to get steamrolled by you, right? Like that's a totally different aspect to his game that I think really showed up in the first day of Senior Bowl practice. And like these are the kind of guys the Chargers should be looking at, trying to find value. Unfortunately, all the rest of the teams get to see him as well, right? And these guys are definitely going to be shooting up draft boards. But there were a few more players that stood out, including a guy in Trevor Penning that was, most commonly mocked to the Chargers at 17 from Northern Iowa. So we'll talk about his performance on day one, and also an edge rusher who really stood out that could make sense for the Chargers as early as round one, maybe even day two. But we'll get into that coming up after this. First, I need to tell you guys about the official betting sponsor of the Locked On Chargers podcast, and that's betonline.net. There might be less football being played, but betonline.net has way more stuff to bet on this playoff season. When you're looking at the playoffs, especially as the games are dwindling down, now there's only one game left, and it's the Super Bowl. But the nice thing about the Super Bowl, that's the funnest game to bet on in any sport all season long. There's so many great things that you can bet on as far as props for players, right? For his things like singing the national anthem. Like you can find all the bets at betonline.net. That's the best place for the Super Bowl. So make sure you guys get in now so you guys can get in on the action during the Super Bowl. But from scores, totals, player performance props to where the next coach fired is going to land, BetOnline is the number one spot for all things NFL betting in 2022. And it's not just football, it's basketball, it's NHL, it's UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games, because BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all of your favorite sports and play your favorite games. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, David, we had some more players we wanted to talk about. And this is only the first day of practice, so we'll probably get into some more of these guys later on and talk about the standouts and guys who really raised their draft stock that could make sense for the Chargers given their needs. But one of the other big needs that they have is that right tackle. And that's one of the spots that maybe the Chargers could select a guy in the first round. And one of those guys that has been mocked to the Chargers. I mean, a few different players, have been mocked to the Chargers at tackle at 17. And two of them, or maybe three of them even, are at the Senior Bowl right now. One of those guys is Trevor Penning. And this is a great opportunity for him specifically because he comes from Northern Iowa. So he's not always playing the big Power 5 dudes and the giant school prospects, right? This is a great chance for him. I think he stood out, David. I mean, there was some good and some bad, but I think it really held up to kind of what we were watching this week when we did our mock draft Monday.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this was a guy that we dove into some tape on, and one of the things that showed up right away is this dude is physical. Like he plays with that aggressive mindset, and that's something that showed itself on this first day from the clips that we watched from Trevor Penning here at the Senior Bowl practices. He was throwing people around. He was
good and bad.
Throwing people into the ground, and unfortunately, he was throwing guys into the quarterback as well, which obviously is something I'm sure he'll learn from very quickly. But
maybe the Chargers just crossed him off like right then, at the Senior Bowl. The scouts there like, hey, pretty good. Oh no, imagine if that was Justin Herbert's legs. Like, sorry, kid, you're done.
Yeah, that was Justin Herbert there, and we can't allow that to happen. So no more Penning. Bye-bye. Yeah. You're off the list. No. But yeah, this is the guy I think just confirms all the things that we saw on tape. And he showed that here in this first day of practice.
Yeah, I mean, and he struggled with some of the same things. I mean, he got beat on a very quick inside move as well, which is something he struggled with. But like to see that physicality in a practice setting, I mean, knowing there's a lot at stake, obviously, but to see that from him, it was nice to see it's continued, right? And the other part of it is especially for guys who, maybe new to the position or playing against lower competition, they get to be coached by NFL coaches, right? And that's a great place for them to fix their technique, to get some pointers, to test themselves against the best guys, obviously, but to have those resources that they might not get at the college level, or maybe different perspective on things as they try to head to the NFL on things that they can improve on. And one guy that would need a lot of improvement, David, if the Chargers took him, is Daniel Faalele, everyone's favorite right tackle to pick from in college from Minnesota.
Gotta give you a round of applause for that one, Daniel. I know you did your research on that, and flawless execution.
Yeah, I mean, this is my first time attempting the name, and we did it live, so I'm happy with myself, or at least, on video, which is live enough for me. But he's the guy that I think everyone's in love with just because he's like a monstrous behemoth. Like, I mean, 6'9", 380 pounds. They gave it to them, they gave him the ball on the goal line once this year, at least. I mean, and that's not a sight that you want to see coming. But I also think, David, that, you also saw some of the reasons why at that size, he's not just like an automatic first round pick.
Yeah, because, I mean, the dude is gigantic. Obviously, that really, really stands out right away. I mean, the guy is unbelievably huge. But what are some of the things that we have come to understand with dudes of that size?
The King
they tend to struggle with speed. And that's something that we saw quite a bit here in this first day of Senior Bowl practice was guys getting him on the inside, guys getting around and, getting around the outside of him. In the running game, the guy was dominant. I mean, and I think that was kind of his calling card anyway. Daniel is a guy who's just mauling people and really moving people out of the way in the running game. But, I mean, to play tackle at the next level, you have to be able to deal with speed, guys. And, I mean, there were guys that were able to use their speed and also kind of get him off balance as well. And, you really can't have that from a man of that size. I mean, if he's not upright, then you can't protect against those edge rushers coming after your quarterback. So, I mean, a guy who's obviously got the incredible size that anyone would love and anyone would covet, but some of those finer things and some of that speed, I mean, that's definitely a bit concerning.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is like there are certain teams that you could sacrifice some pass blocking for run blocking, right? Just because that's the scheme that you're running. When you have Justin Herbert dropping back and throwing it 37 times a game, like
at least, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can't really afford to have somebody who's not flawless in pass protection. I mean, it just becomes a much harder argument to make when you're trying to draft somebody like this. And I saw him most recently mocked to the Chargers at 17th overall, which is something obviously I would be very uncomfortable with.
I would
a lot
be very
of tools
angry
to work with for sure, but like Trey Pipkins was a huge dude. You know what I mean? So like, it doesn't always translate. And even though he did play at Minnesota, he did have some snap count issues where it's like, why isn't he on the field more than he is? and things like that as well. But an unfinished product for sure. Maybe you can turn it around this week at the Senior Bowl and just start manhandling people in the running game and the
We
passing
will be
game as
watching.
well. Exactly. So this is day one, and we'll continue to cover these guys as far as the week and guys who stand out. And there's a lot of good people on the Locked On Podcast Network. You can follow on Twitter as well, like Ross Jackson, Shop Talking Wig, our boy Tony Wiggins, Locked On Jaguars. I feel
That
bad for
dude
that
is
dude.
amazing, man. I
Yeah.
love Tony Wiggins. If you guys just check out his episodes, you're gonna laugh. That guy is one of the most entertaining hosts that we have on the network.
Especially as he agonizes over like a head coaching hire and the Jaguars absolutely bungling it. But one of the
Oh,
other guys
man.
that stood out, speaking of Florida, right, was Florida State star edge rusher Jermaine Johnson, who, I mean,
Oh,
talk about a dude who dominated on day one. There's
yes.
a lot of the talk from the scouts and stuff has been like, this dude just had his draft stock propel, into potentially round one. He was on Daniel Jeremiah's top 50 list as recently as yesterday, as you guys are hearing this, as the 20th best prospect. And this is another position, David, where we know the Chargers are going to be attacking edge rusher in the first round.
As they
He's
should.
and he was a transfer from Georgia. And so like he doesn't have a lot of stats to his name, but he did transfer to Florida State, where
Yeah.
he had 12 sacks and 18 tackles for loss this season. But this is from Dame Brugler of The Athletic on what Jermaine Johnson did on day one. Florida State pass rusher Jermaine Johnson, the number 3 player on my list, who looked like the NFL's best prospect on Tuesday's practice. During one-on-ones and team drills of the American practice, Johnson was a nightmare to block due to his power, length, and relentless play demeanor. And that's something it seems like the Chargers could use a lot of
Music
in
to
their
my
front
ears,
seven.
Daniel. I like everything that you just said. I mean, from a pass rusher's perspective, that is what you want, and that's the juice that every team could benefit from. I mean, for me, what I saw just effort and intensity right away. I mean, the guy snap whistle to whistle, he is going a million miles an hour, and I love that speed to power. It definitely translates. This
Yeah.
guy rushes with phenomenal leverage. Like that's really, I think, one of his best assets is he's able to convert that speed to power so well because he plays with good leverage, and that showcased itself very, very much and on many different occasions here on this first day of Senior Bowl practices.
Yeah, and I mean he's kind of a one-hit wonder. So I mean, to use a
Yeah,
first-round pick on it, maybe that's a little out of the Chargers comfort zone, I would say.
sure. Yeah.
But I mean, you just see a dude that was that physically dominant, that fast. Like I mean,
Well, and a
everything he
smart
did
guy
was
too,
massive.
right? He was
Yeah,
on the defense in Georgia where he was one of the small fishes,
yeah,
and then he goes over to Florida and then he's the shark now.
yeah.
He's the main dude. He put the spotlight on himself. I think that's just, kind of speaks to his intelligence.
Well, it's just crazy too, because it's like, especially Alabama, Georgia, these places where it's like, how many like really good NFL players are probably buried on that roster just because there's other
Seriously, man. That's
really good
crazy.
NFL players in front of them and first-round picks in front
What
of them, right?
pipelines those colleges are. Just
Yeah.
unbelievable.
For sure. I mean, it's a whole thing. But this dude, I think, just put himself on the map. But I know there's a lot of Charger fans out there that get into this draft process, and like you've
Oh,
gotten
yeah.
more into it recently or looking at guys the Chargers could potentially target. And I mean, if I was the Chargers, I mean, that definitely would have piqued my interest what I saw from him in day one of the Senior Bowl practices, especially at a position of need.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting prospect and a guy that we'll definitely be looking more into now and definitely following a lot closer
Oh,
this
yeah.
week as these Senior Bowl practices and this weekend when the game happens, right? If he plays, I mean, he might raise his stock so much he might not even play in the game. That wouldn't surprise me at all. We saw that from guys last year, like Mac Jones didn't end up playing in the game. So you do enough during practice, you might end up getting to take the game off. But there were also some offensive skill players, David, because we know the Chargers maybe have an RB2 issue still, especially with Justin Jackson going into free agency. And
Yeah.
we know they can get a little bit more explosive at
A
wide
lot
receiver.
more.
Yeah, and we saw some guys that could potentially provide that at the Senior Bowl and guys the Chargers should be looking at. So we'll get into a wide receiver, a running back, and a cornerback who made a name for themselves on day one of the Senior Bowl. But first, I need to tell you guys about my favorite protein bar on the planet. And of course, I'm talking about Built Bar. Oh, I just got so excited that I dropped my phone because I was thinking about Built Bars. It's easy to get distracted while you're eating a Built Bar because they taste delicious. And that's one of the things that kind of throws you off about Built Bar. And you kind of have to do a double take is like you take a bite out of it and it tastes so good that like you're like, wait, there must be like a misprint on the label or something like that because like something that fits on your diet is not supposed to taste so good. I mean, that's the unicorn, right? You're always looking for the unicorn, something that's healthy for you and also something that tastes great because sometimes it doesn't happen that way. I would say most times it's very hard to find that. But one of the great things about Built Bar, there's so many flavors to choose from. That's what I like about it. You get the variety. You're not going to get tired of it. You can go with my favorites. I stay consistent, right? I'm peanut butter brownie. I'm cookies and cream all the way. But if you want to go coconut almond, if you want to go mint brownie, if you want to go cherry barcia, those are great flavors too, because they're all 100% covered in chocolate, A plus there, and soft and easy to chew. You're not getting something chalky. You're not getting something waxy. You're getting something that tastes great. It feels like you're cheating on your diet great. And you're also getting something that still fits on your diet and is good for you as well. And another thing that'll be good for you is saving money. And since you guys listen to this show, you can save 15% off at built.com when you use the promo code LOCKED15. So make sure you use that promo code LOCKED15, all caps, one word, to save money, and 15% off at builtbar.com or built.com. Either way, both work. But Built Bar, great protein bar. I'm going to eat one right after this. All right, David, well, let's get into the last segment here about a couple of guys who stood out and a couple more guys that kind of made their way onto the radar of not only scouts, but also for us as well, knowing what the Chargers need. And one of the things they desperately need, to me, is a guy who can create for himself after the catch, more explosiveness on the offense. I think that's one thing their offense is lacking. I mean, yeah, Mike Williams can get down the field and make big plays. That's explosive in its own way. But just athletically speaking, speed-wise, they don't necessarily have that guy right now. And one of the guys that really stood out to me from what I saw from the Senior Bowl practice day one was Calvin Austin, a guy that could help in the punt return game, a guy that really just stood out as, even though a small guy, a guy that could potentially fill some of those issues that the Chargers have.
Yeah, he's definitely small. There's no question. He's about 5'9", 165, 166. So a very, very slight frame, but this dude is electric. I mean, he is really, really fast. It's easy speed, too. It's easy to notice his speed as well.
And he's quick,
too. Yeah, very quick. Very good route runner, too. Like, he gets separation, and he gets separation quickly. You see him really get open on those slants. You saw him really do stop and goes and really just create separation very easily with his route running. Also able to track the ball over the top and able to make all of those catches. So not only did he have the speed, but he had the good hands as well. Yeah. This is a guy I'm definitely intrigued by. It seems like this is a guy who you get the ball to in open space, and he's going to make things happen. He's just got that explosive kind of speed that you're looking for. Yeah, he's small, but yeah. I mean, you're going to have to kind of take that trade-off sometimes with a guy like this who can really move.
Yeah, and I mean, I saw before the Senior Bowl is, he's a little over 5'9". Then he weighs in and gets his, measurements done at the Senior Bowl, and it's 5'7 3/8. A little alarming, right? But we've seen guys that are small succeed, and I think we're seeing it more and more now with rules that protect receivers, right, and offensive players in general. But this dude is dynamic, and the Chargers need some more, dynamism on their offense, especially just getting the ball to people quickly, especially with the short routes that Joe Lombardi loves to run, right, and call for Justin Herbert. And a guy that, he definitely showed it an extra gear. Like, the top speed will be interesting to see what he runs in the 40 and things like that. But one thing he did do was he was stacking defensive backs, and he seemed to separate as the ball got there. And that's something where that's the kind of speed that you're looking for, especially on those deep passes, a guy who can create separation deep down the field, which is not something the Chargers have a lot of right now. Tiny guy, and I'm not saying, first, second round pick, but especially if the Chargers don't go in that direction early at wide receiver, a guy that definitely has piqued my interest, and I think that's
take a flyer on this guy with one of your many late round picks. I'm not going to be mad about it. I mean,
I don't know if he'll make it into the 4, 7, 3-round picks that Tom Telesco is supposed to have, but maybe trading a couple of those to go get him.
Even if it's a mid round pick, honestly, like this is a guy who can really, break the game for you. I think he has that type of ability. So the Chargers need to add more of these type of athletes because they just don't have enough, nor have they added enough of them in the last several years.
Yeah, you always need offensive playmakers. I mean, you can never have enough of them. And that's a guy where, you look at him and you're just like, hey, I mean, I could see some things, where the Chargers could find a way to get this dude in the open field and potentially help him hit him on some deep passes for sure. But one of the dudes who had the best runs of the day was Dameon Pierce, the running back from Florida. And it's hard to know where this guy's going to go. Day 2 pick, is he slide into day 3? It's hard to say. But one of the things that you saw from senior day, Senior Bowl practice 1 was just his explosiveness and his physicality. Because if you watch this dude and what he did against Georgia, I mean, Florida got blown out, but he had some really physical runs and had, nice average, like 7 yards per carry against the best defense in the country. And you saw some of that at the Senior Bowl. Works nice in tight spaces, and I think would just be a nice compliment potentially for Austin Eckler, someone that I'm definitely going to be looking at least more into now.
Yeah, he's got the profile of the type of running back I think you want to couple with Austin Eckler. The guy's around 220 pounds, which, that's the type of guy you kind of want to bring in. You want a guy that's 220, 230, 235, even 240, honestly, would be fine with me. I want that, big bruiser type of running back. I love the fact that this guy can really put his foot in the ground and then make a cut and go and just take off. He still has good burst and acceleration for his size, and he's a guy who's hard to bring down. He's really, breaks tackles, gets those extra yards that you want from that profile of that type of running back. So this is a guy I'm definitely intrigued about. I think we'll be keeping a closer eye on as things progress this week and into the Senior Bowl game as well. Hopefully we get to see what he can do in that game-like setting.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's always that never hurts your stock, right? When you have something like that. But he's the dude that's definitely having his stock rising through this, and a guy that, if you don't take that explosive wide receiver, maybe there are some more in this draft that can help you out later on. But one of the things that the Senior Bowl is great for is getting to see guys you wouldn't normally get to see going up against the top competition. That's one of the best things, getting those one-on-ones from the offensive lineman and defensive line, getting the one-on-ones between the wide receivers and corners. And this is a dude that ended up standing out in a big way, and it's Joshua Williams from Fayetteville State, an HBCU, right?
Say it again, Daniel.
Yeah, Fayetteville State. Yeah, I mean, the D2 guy that was, I mean, you just look at him and you're like, well, that dude's just a freakish athlete. I mean, whether or not he can play corner or not, we'll see by what happens.
He looks the part,
this week.
right?
Yeah, but I mean, 6'3". I mean, had the top speed at the Senior Bowl in day one. He hit 21.75 miles per hour.
Wow.
Yeah, he was the fastest player there on day one. And I mean, had a couple of
awesome.
And then you pair that, David, with, he also showed some physicality in the one-on-ones as well. We're like, oh, damn. I mean, that dude just put the clamps on that guy, right?
Yeah, he did, man. I mean, really didn't even let the receiver get off and get into his route. He jammed him so hard and was able to get such clean contact of his pads that he couldn't go anywhere. And the quarterback didn't even attempt to throw the football because the defensive back won that rep so thoroughly. So you love that. I love that out of a corner, honestly. I love that physicality, that feistiness, that, hey, you're not even going to get anywhere because I'm not going to let you go 5 yards. You're not going to go anywhere. I'm going to control everything about what you do. And I love that. I love that mentality in a cornerback. And also, I think something I want to point out with this guy as well is really seemed like he was really fluid. He was able to flip his hips really easily in the open field. Seems like he's just a smooth athlete. And I think you can kind of see that with some of these guys that, that have that natural athleticism. Like, this guy is smooth. I mean, he has that ability, that fluidity that you're looking for when you're looking for a corner.
And like I said, you can't ever have enough offensive playmakers. This is maybe a guy you can take later on in the draft just because you can never have enough corners, right? Even if you end up taking a corner in round one, there's always chance to improve at that position. We know the Chargers' depth at that position got really tested last year, and we know they don't have the depth. So, I mean, this is definitely a draft where they could take multiple cornerbacks, right? And when you see a Division II guy like this who just has that physical profile, maybe you say he is worth a shot because he also got burnt for a long touchdown as well. He fought through the rep. He caught up, nice, recovery speed he had on it for sure. Tried to get the ball out of the receiver's hands. Just got a little too grabby, and that is something I'm sure I'll have to deal with as well. But we're not talking about a guy you need to potentially, impact it for you right away or make an impact play for you right away. It's a guy you potentially develop because it's like, yeah, I could see those tools. And obviously, if we can get something out of it, I mean, you're looking at a physical freak and a guy that can match up, with some of the fastest players and shows some physicality as well with the great length that, could turn into some serious ball hawking skills too. So
you're always going to look for those type of traits and those type of those just natural athletic abilities that you feel like, hey, I mean, this guy's got that, and you can't teach talent, but you can teach some of these techniques. And I think you feel a lot better about having a guy who has the ability versus a guy who just doesn't have the ability. I mean, it's a lot easier to teach that when you got the skills and you got the speed and talent.
Well, in the NFL is a traits league. You know what I mean?
Right.
They're looking for the traits, and they'll feel like they can develop it. Whether they can or not, obviously that's a big thing. But that's what Michael Davis was, right? Just a really toolsy dude who they brought in as an undrafted free agent, and now he, is a more polished player, even though he's not coming off the best of season. But that is something. Kobe Bryant, Cincinnati cornerback, was actually out there too and had a couple of plays. He'll be someone I'm watching going forward as well. But the Senior Bowl guys, I mean, definitely something to keep an eye on, because the Chargers will end up getting someone from the Senior Bowl. Mark my words, in Jim Nagy's words, right? But yeah, it's just a cool thing, especially during these practices. And you're seeing the clips on Twitter. We'll be retweeting them, so you can follow that on Twitter at Locked On LAC, and we'll keep, give some notes on some guys that could make sense for the Chargers going forward. But we also have the Pro Bowl this weekend too. So at some point, we definitely want to get into some Pro Bowl free agents potentially, David. Could the Chargers nab a couple of Pro Bowlers in free agency? That's something we want to take a look at, and we'll just see how the Justin Herbert's the starting quarterback for the Pro Bowl. So as much as the Pro Bowl doesn't matter, that's pretty damn cool for Justin Herbert. So we'll definitely talk a little bit about that for sure. But that's going to wrap things up for today's show. We'll be back to you guys tomorrow. But until then, make sure you follow us on or subscribe to our new Locked On Chargers YouTube page, most importantly, because we love having you guys on YouTube. But also follow the show for free on all platforms, wherever you get your podcast from as well. We're podcast guys. And now, YouTube, but we still love our podcasters, and I listen to a ton of podcasts as well. If you don't see it on, Apple Podcasts or anything like that, you can also find the show on all of our social media, and there'll be multiple places where you guys can check it out. You can follow the show on Twitter, like I said, at Locked On LAC, and you can also get the show from me at Dan Talk Sports on Twitter, and David Drogemeyer at Dro Talk SD as well. We still might do Fan Mail Friday, so if you guys want to get involved with the show, I mean, those questions will stay good. We'll get to them at some point. You can call on the Locked On Chargers voicemail line. The number is 323-524-7924, and we'll be putting out a post on Twitter as well to get you guys' questions, see what you want us to be talking about during the offseason. But you can also find us on Facebook and our at Locked On Chargers Instagram page as well. But we'll be back to you guys tomorrow. Until then, take it easy and go Bolts.